Yeah, we got involved through an incident that happened with one of my daughters. She was 16 years old and was sexually assaulted at a prep school in the Northeast for no reason. I mean, other than she was around a bad guy at the wrong time, and it was part of a kitchen duty that she was doing that was required of all the students. And this man took her downstairs and did some unspeakable things. And fortunately, the justice system put him away for 25 years. But I lost my daughter for a year. Literally couldn't speak to her. She would go into these kind of balls of, she'd ball up, her eyes would go back in her head, and she couldn't speak, literally, for days at a time. And we went and brought her to the best hospitals, we brought her to the best psychiatrists, and only a year and a half into this whole thing, after missing a year of school and then going back hit or miss for another half year, she had a female psychiatrist help her out of the abyss, and she went back and testified against this guy and put him in prison. And it was remarkable, and she's a completely different lady because of that, but she's still wounded. And what dawned on my wife and I is that for the first time in our lives we understood that mental health was real, because this is a girl who was in every way healthy before. And there was a traumatic event in her life that changed her chemistry, literally. Her physiology changed. I know it. I saw it because her mind was had a shock. And we thought, God, these poor young ladies particularly, but also extends to young men who may be in inner cities who do not have the resources or a family unit like we did, where you have a couple that's married that's totally supportive, totally in love with the child, and somewhat close to unlimited resources to try to help her with. They would never have gotten out of that hole, ever. And then we started examining what, we saw because of what our policies covered, and we of course could do without it, but we saw how unfair it was that you had more limited treatments for mental illness than you had for physical illness, and different caps. And our only point was that we think the federal government, where there is health care provided for physical reasons, ought to also include mental health care as part of physical reasons, because we've seen the physical manifestations of it. We have absolutely no doubt that the mind is part of what causes physical illness or physical health. And so we implemented it voluntarily in a number of companies in Houston, including all the ones I've been associated with. And we continue to argue for it in Congress. There's been a bill passed in the House, and there's been a bill passed in the Senate. And to me, it's a bit where I just got done telling you how little government intervention we ought to have. This is not government intervention in terms of saying, hey, provide medical care like this to everybody. It's just where there is health care already provided. I'm convinced, because I've run been in 3 companies where we've had this happen, it increases your medical bills by 1.5% or less. And in return for that, you get huge amounts of productivity, not just from the employee who may have that happen, but from every family member who's affected by somebody who may have had that happen. The amount of times I went to emergency rooms and left my job to go take care of my daughter is an absolute proof of the productivity loss. It wasn't me that had the issue, it was a family member who had it. And the same is true throughout the country. So there's absolutely no doubt at all in my mind that the federal government ought to say, well, if you provide health care, don't treat it in a discriminatory fashion. And that's what we're arguing for. And interestingly, I'm arguing against the business lobby because they don't want to have costs go up. But there are a number of businesses that I consider enlightened in Houston who have adopted this voluntarily, and we believe wholeheartedly in it because we've seen it work.